Welcome to the Preschool Transitional Kindergartens Learning Foundation, or PTKLF, presentation of the Social and Emotional Development domain. My name is Olivia Damaris, and I am a Child Development Consultant in the California Department of Education. This pre-recorded presentation is part of the series of presentations developed by the California Department of Education in partnership with WestEd that follows the release of the PTKLF. The purpose of these presentations is to provide a snapshot of each domain covered in the publication. And today's presentation is focused on the social and emotional development domain. We are joined by the writer of this domain, Tatiana Hill-Maini. For an overview of the introduction of the PTKLF publication, including its structure, organizations, and major revisions, please visit our prior pre-recorded presentation titled PTKLF Introductions. The agenda for today is to first provide acknowledgements for the contributions of this specific domain. Next, we will provide an overview of the organization of this domain, and then provide examples of foundations in each strand. Strand 1, self. Strand 2, interactions and relationships with adults. And Strand 3, interactions and relationships with peers. We will then provide an overview of the diversity of children's social and emotional development, followed by a brief section on how educators can support social and emotional learning. Lastly, we will end with a closing and look at future pre-recorded presentations. To begin, we want to take a moment to list some acknowledgements for individuals who contributed significant time to the development of this domain. In addition to the California Department of Education and WestEd team, we had our WestEd lead writer, Tatiana Hill-Maini. We also consulted with subject matter experts, Oscar Barbarin from the University of Maryland, Sarah Rim-Kaufman from the University of Virginia, Stephanie Jones from Harvard University, and Ross Thompson from the University of California, Davis. We also had specific reviewers who brought the lens of inclusion, cultural diversity, or multilingual learners. Ioma Iruka from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Mary McLean from the University of Florida, Marlene Zepeda from California State University, Los Angeles, and Frida Bennett from the Quartz Valley Indian Reservation. We would also like to thank our many educators and interest holders who participated in focus groups and provided feedback. I will now pass it on to the WestEd lead writer to talk through the details of this domain.
Thank you. I'll first start with the overall definition, structure, and organization of this domain. The PTKLF in the domain of social and emotional development describe 3 to 5.5-year-olds' social and emotional competencies they demonstrate and develop through their early learning experiences. In early childhood, a child develops understanding of their self's social and emotional qualities, including their own emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, as well as awareness of their abilities and identities. Once a child develops a concept of self, they extend this understanding to others. Children's social and emotional development is shaped in the context of interactions with adults and peers. Supporting children's healthy social and emotional development helps them build strong, respectful relationships with others, appreciate people's similarities and differences, and learn to collaborate and solve problems with others. These qualities promote social awareness and lay the groundwork for equity and pro-social behaviors, contributing to children's sense of belonging, inclusion, love, and acceptance. The organization of the social and emotional development domain is the first strand of self, which includes self-awareness, emotional knowledge, regulating emotions and behaviors and social awareness. Strand 2 of interactions and relationships with adults, which includes interactions with adults, attachment, and relationships with adults. And strand 3 of interactions and relationships with peers, which includes interactions with peers, equitable social interactions, and relationships with peers. This is also a sample of how the foundations are structured with the substrand numbered. In this case, it is 2.4, which indicates it is within the second strand of interactions and relationships with adults, and the fourth substrand within this strand, labeled relationships with adults. The foundation statements are then underneath this label and describe the skills children can demonstrate in the early foundation, the column on the left, and the later foundation, the column on the right. Below these foundation statements are a series of examples, only one of which is listed here to demonstrate. The first 1 to 2 examples for each foundation are aligned to demonstrate the developmental progression more clearly. For the early foundation, 3 to 4.5, the foundation statement is contribute to maintaining positive relationships with attachment figures or adults in children's lives who are caregivers, which may include teachers, and familiar adults. Show emerging awareness of the adult's feelings, preferences, and well-being. The example is, while walking over to their parent, a child notices that the parent's eyes are wet. The child frowns and communicates, "Mama, are you sad?" The child then gives their parent a big hug. For the later foundation, 4 to 5.5, the foundation statement is contribute to positive mutual relationships and cooperation with attachment figures or adults in children's lives who are caregivers, which may include teachers, and familiar adults. Show interest in the adult's feelings, preferences, and well-being. The example is a child says to their parent, "Why are you crying?" The parent explains that their friend is sick in the hospital. The child expresses concern and offers support. "It's going to be okay." So what has changed from the 2008 Preschool Learning Foundations? Some major changes from the 2008 Preschool Learning Foundations include that we reorganized strands by adults and peers. You will now see the strands of interactions and relationships with adults and interactions and relationships with peers. With the creation of the Approaches to Learning domain, we moved content to the Approaches to Learning domain that more appropriately fit there, such as the foundation formerly called Initiative in Learning, as well as foundation content on aspects of self-regulation. We edited foundations to center more on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which led to the creation of an equitable social interactions substrand with a foundation on fairness and respect toward others who may be similar or different. Where there was previously a self-awareness foundation, there is now a self-awareness substrand that includes a foundation centered on identity, known as self-identity, as well as a foundation on competence and abilities. And lastly, to consider the impact of stress and experiences of trauma, we edited the foundations to address regulating emotions, behaviors, and stress. Now I will present some samples within each strand. The first strand is self, which addresses skills that pertain to self-awareness, emotional knowledge, regulating emotions and behaviors, and social awareness. Self-awareness includes a sense of efficacy in one's own abilities, as well as a sense of personal and group identities. Children's emotional knowledge consists of understanding emotions, the connection between emotions and behavior, and how others expect them to show emotions and behaviors. This first strand also addresses regulating emotions and behaviors and the related skill of managing transitions and routines in early education programs. The ability to regulate emotions is closely related to children's executive functions, which are described in greater detail in the Approaches to Learning domain. Lastly, the strand includes social awareness, which encompasses understanding of others' internal states, thoughts, and feelings, and contributes to empathy and caring. This example comes from the self-awareness substrand. The early foundation is focused on noticing and communicating the characteristics of their physical appearance related to specific identities, like their gender, race, or ethnicity. And they demonstrate an emerging preference for specific activities, like what to play or how to dress. For example, in the early foundation, a child may gesture to an image of a person in a storybook that has braids and indicate that the character in the storybook has braids like theirs. Then, in the later foundation, the child continues to express aspects of their identity, like their hairstyle, but begins to exhibit more pride in their identity. Like during a conversation about morning routines, a child may excitedly comment, I like my hair in afro puffs. So you can tell how the child went from awareness of aspects of their identity to a more established sense of pride in aspects of their identity. The second strand is interactions and relationships with adults, which describes social interactions with adults, attachment, and relationships with attachment figures and other familiar adults. From the beginning of life, children form attachment relationships with the adults who are their primary caregivers. Through providing sensitive and responsive care to the child, a primary caregiver supports the development of a secure attachment relationship. Children can develop attachment relationships with multiple caregivers, including parents, other relatives, care providers, and teachers who, through repeated interactions, show the child they are reliable and responsive to their needs. Relationships with attachment figures influence how children interact and form relationships with other familiar adults. This example comes from the attachment substrand, focused on seeking authority. In the early foundation, children seek security and support from their attachment figures, like adults in their lives who are caregivers, which may include teachers, to address their needs, especially in difficult situations. For example, while doing a difficult task like trying to zip up their jacket, the child may ask for help from an adult they are close with. In the later foundation, children begin to anticipate when they will need support and take greater initiative in seeking support from their attachment figures to address their needs. For example, before trying to do a difficult task like closing a heavy door, they go to the teacher for help. So you can tell that children in preschool at first seek security and support for attachment figures, and then begin to anticipate support that is needed from attachment figures and familiar adults, especially in difficult situations. This interactions and relationships with peers strand describes children's interactions with peers, including problem solving and negotiation and friendships with specific peers. This strand also includes a foundation focused on equitable social interactions. When interacting with peers from diverse backgrounds, children can learn to treat others equitably, which means to value others and treat others with fairness and respect. The way that this might look might be using a quiet tone when they know another child is sensitive to noise, or comforting a child who is feeling left out. This example comes from the interactions with peers substrand, focused on conflict resolution with peers. In the early foundation, children seek adult assistance to resolve peer conflicts or disagreements. For example, a child goes to get an adult when a peer is not taking turns on the slide. Then, in the later foundation, a child negotiates with peers and more often communicates to respond to conflict. After this, they still may seek adult assistance to understand their peers' needs or to resolve the conflict. For example, one child may want to go on the slide and another may want to go on the seesaw. So the child may suggest they take turns and go first on the seesaw and then on the slide. So, as you can tell, the progression goes from more immediately seeking adult assistance to resolving conflict to more effectively communicating with peers to communicate their needs, but they still may need adult assistance to resolve the conflict. I also want to highlight the importance of social and emotional development among children, so that as you use the PTKLF, you can keep in mind this diversity. Cultural norms and expectations around social behaviors and emotional expression may inform how children control their emotions, favor certain activities, or gravitate toward more communal or collaborative interactions. In some cultures, children may be encouraged to demonstrate greater control over their emotions and behaviors in the classroom, while in other cultures, children may prefer to be active, engage in movement, or do activities along to music as a form of emotional and behavioral expression. Growing up experiencing multiple languages, cultures, and context is ultimately beneficial for children's social and emotional development. Children learn to understand different perspectives and flexibly switch between language and cultural systems and environments. There are also individual differences in children's temperament that may make them more inclined to exhibit behaviors in response to emotions, such as internalizing behaviors like withdrawing versus externalizing behaviors like responding outwardly in a physical or verbal way. Children with disabilities may also have different ways of communicating, interacting with others, and expressing themselves. Specifically, children with disabilities such as autism or sensory sensitivity, or whose attentional and impulse control is inconsistent, may demonstrate social and emotional foundations in varying ways. Children with autism or sensory sensitivity may show more extreme levels of arousal in situations that might be overwhelming to them, such as being around too much noise. They also may express or interpret social cues in interactions differently and may rely more on additional visual and verbal cues than do other children. Children who experience difficulties with impulse control may benefit from dividing up focus time on tasks with breaks for movement. Children with autism or sensory sensitivity, or who experience difficulties with attention and impulse control, may require additional supports for social and emotional development, especially in regulating their emotions and behaviors when overwhelmed or having additional time to make transitions. Trauma is defined as a harmful, sometimes prolonged psychological and/or physiological stress response caused by an adverse environment or stressful event, which includes but is not limited to experiencing emotional or physical neglect, experiencing housing insecurity, growing up with an incarcerated parent, or living in a household where there is substance abuse. Moreover, historical trauma resulting from systemic oppression, for example, violent colonization of indigenous people, the Holocaust, slavery, and enforced migration, has a multi-generational impact on a cultural, racial, or ethnic group that in turn may be harmful and disruptive to communities, families, and their children. Children may display a range of behaviors that may arise from stress and trauma, including heightened or minimal levels of emotional arousal, being on high alert, or resisting caregivers. Adults, such as teachers, can provide trauma-informed supports and strategies to cope with stress, address reactions to traumatic experiences, and help children build resilience. For example, I'm going to try that one more time. For example, teachers may dedicate time and attention to learning about the specific context of a child and the underlying reasons the child's stress response may be activated. The teachers may then set goals to meet the child's individual needs so that the child feels safe, secure, and heard. The foundations also have many tips and strategies for how educators can support children's social and emotional development. I will highlight a few main categories of teacher strategies and instructional supports: warm, responsive interactions and relationships with adults, a safe and supportive environment, and opportunities for peer interactions, empathy, and pro-social development. So for warm, responsive interactions and relationships with adults, teachers can approach children with warmth and invest time in building a connection with each child, which will help the child to engage in positive interactions and build relationships with adults. For example, teachers may welcome a child into the classroom with a greeting such as, "I'm so happy to see you," and provide a warm goodbye as they depart. Expressing warmth and affection to create an emotional connection is possible, even if a teacher does not speak a child's home language, for example, by smiling, getting on the child's level, or learning a few familiar phrases in the child's home language. Teachers can also demonstrate responsiveness by identifying children's emotions, behaviors, and needs, and consistently responding to each child in ways that meet their individual needs. Providing clear expectations will help to guide children's behaviors and make transitions manageable. Teachers can also build relationships with families to learn about children's home environment, find out about children's interests and previous experiences, and better understand how to support healthy interactions with children in their transitions from home to school. The physical environment should help children feel safe, welcome, and comfortable to express their authentic emotions. Teachers can offer strategies and tools to help children regulate their emotions. For example, teachers can create a designated space, such as a cozy corner, with visual cards that children can use to communicate strong emotions and practice breathing exercises. The environment should also promote a sense of belonging and joy for all children. Teachers can create equitable learning environments by providing accessible and developmentally appropriate play materials. While being authentic and challenging stereotypes, materials and activities in the environment can empower children to make choices and can reflect the children's strengths and interests. The environment and materials in the room, such as decorations, books, and toys, should also reflect the diversity of children's identities. Should a child with a disability need additional support to demonstrate the foundations, teachers can consult with the specialists who work with the child to provide environmental adaptations. For example, flexible or modified seating, adaptations to materials, for example, making objects easy to grasp, and instructional adaptations, like verbal and nonverbal modeling and prompting. For children with disabilities, teachers should reference the Individualized Education Program, or IEP, and regularly communicate with a child's IEP team to assist in making accommodations. Teachers can also support children to feel safe and supported in navigating big changes in the environment, like separations from family at the beginning or end of the day, or transitions throughout the day. Examples of strategies include learning about aspects of the children's history, home environment, or behavior that inform how they deal with transitions and separations, and developing daily routines around transitions that help children learn what to expect. For example, singing goodbye songs. Adults can incorporate play and inquiry-based approaches to activities that allow children to exercise social skills and engage in collaborative work with peers where children share roles and responsibilities of others. For children to pursue equitable interactions and relationships with both in-group and out-group members, they must experience intergroup contact and friendships across identities such as gender, race, ethnicity, language background, and children who have or do not have disabilities. It is equally important that teachers and caregivers be supportive when children seek community with members of their in-group with whom they have a shared identity. For example, Black boys playing together, or Spanish-speaking children finding comfort in being with each other. When fostering inclusion, it is important to set clear expectations and provide models and scaffolds to prevent exclusion and actively practice inclusion of children from marginalized groups in daily activities in the classroom. School and classroom diversity contributes to children's social skills and well-being in elementary and middle school. Moreover, inclusive settings can foster empathy and social acceptance toward children with disabilities. While setting up the physical environment and day-to-day interactions is important, it is also important to consider how explicit social and emotional topics are integrated in the curriculum. For example, using the Read Aloud book for an opportunity to discuss social and emotional topics like friendships, inclusion, peer conflict, difficult emotions, different types of families, and different cultures. Social and emotional topics do not need to happen at a specific time of day, but can be integrated across the day, even in art, music, morning meeting, literacy, and more. When designing learning opportunities to support social emotional learning, it is also important to collaborate and invite families to support the design of topics, as the identities and social emotional needs of your children may change from year to year. When planning social emotional learning opportunities, you can also consider using a specific social emotional learning curriculum. I will now pass it back to Olivia and Lily for closing.
Thank you. In closing, for a more detailed view of the social and emotional development domain, please read the full document published on CDE's website. Future pre-recorded presentations will also be published on the CDE website as they are released. And to visit this website, please visit https://www.cdE.ca.gov/sp/cd/RE/PSFOUNS.ASP. Thank you.